Have you ever walked through a supermarket in the UK or the US and felt like you were looking at a battlefield of competition? Every shelf seems packed with choice. Different logos, different colors, different promises. One product says it's healthier, another says it's cheaper, another says it's more premium. And standing there, it genuinely feels like you are choosing between hundreds of independent companies, all fighting for your attention. But what if that feeling of endless competition is slightly misleading? Not because anything is fake on the shelf, and not because companies are hiding in some dramatic secret way, but because most of us are trained to see brands, not ownership. And once you start following the ownership instead of the branding, the picture of the modern consumer world starts to look very different. Let's start with something simple. Think about a supermarket drinks aisle. You see Coca-Cola, Fanta, Sprite, Minute Maid, Powerade, and Dasani lined up on the shelves. At first glance, it feels like you are looking at a wide range of competing brands, each with its own identity, taste, and audience. One is a classic cola. One is fruity and colorful. One is citrus and refreshing. One is aimed at hydration and sports. Another feels like a juice brand for everyday life. But what most people don't immediately realize is that many of these products are actually owned by the same company, the Coca-Cola Company. Instead of representing separate competitors fighting each other, they are different expressions of the same corporate system, each designed to target a specific mood, preference, or occasion. From the outside, it looks like endless choice between independent brands. But underneath, a lot of that competition is happening within one unified portfolio, carefully structured to cover as much of the market as possible. Companies like Unilever, Procter & Gamble, Nestlé, and PepsiCo don't just own one or two brands. They own hundreds, sometimes thousands when you include regional variations. And this is where things start to get interesting. Because instead of competing with one product in each category, these companies often compete with themselves under different names. In a single supermarket aisle, you might see two products sitting side by side that look like rivals, but both quietly belong to the same parent company. From a business point of view, that is not a mistake. It is strategy. It allows a company to control more of the shelf without making it obvious. One brand can target people who care about price. Another can target people who care about health. Another can target people who care about premium image. Same corporate structure underneath, different personalities on the surface. And that surface-level difference is the key, because branding is not just about selling a product. It is about shaping perception. When you pick up a bottle of shampoo, you are not just buying cleaning ingredients. You are buying repair, volume, natural care, or luxury shine. Those emotional ideas matter more in the purchase decision than the actual manufacturing origin. This is why large corporations don't rely on one single identity. They build portfolios of identities. Think of it like a financial investment portfolio. Investors don't put all their money into one stock because risk would be too high. Instead, they spread it across different companies, industries, and regions. Large consumer goods companies do something similar, but with brands instead of stocks. If one brand slows down, another grows. If consumer trends shift, there is already another brand positioned to capture that change. Now zoom out from the supermarket for a moment and look at the bigger system behind it. Over decades, many of these corporations have grown not only by creating new products, but by acquiring successful independent brands. A small company becomes popular, builds a loyal customer base, gets attention online or in retail, and eventually gets bought by a larger group. From the outside, nothing seems to change. The packaging looks the same. The marketing tone stays familiar. The product still feels independent. But behind the scenes, ownership has shifted into a much larger structure. This is one of the most common growth strategies in modern business. It is often faster and safer to buy a brand that already has trust than to build one from scratch. Trust takes years to build, but it can be purchased in a single deal. That's why many brands you think of as independent or niche may actually sit inside much larger corporate ecosystems. And this is not limited to food or household goods. It extends into beauty, fashion, and personal care. Take personal care as an example. Companies like L'Oreal operate across dozens of sub-brands that target completely different emotional identities. One brand feels clinical and scientific. Another feels natural and plant-based. Another feels luxury and aspirational. Another feels affordable and everyday. To the customer, these feel like separate worlds. But from a corporate perspective, they are different entry points into the same ecosystem of demand. And this is where psychology becomes just as important as economics. Because human beings do not naturally track ownership. We track emotion, familiarity, and repetition. If a brand looks familiar, it feels trustworthy. If an advertisement feels polished, we assume the product is high quality. If packaging looks different, we assume the product is different. Companies understand this extremely well. That is why they don't need to create one perfect product for everyone. They create multiple versions of good enough, each designed for a different type of consumer mindset. Now extend this idea into beverages. The global drinks market is dominated by a few major corporations that control enormous portfolios of soft drinks, juices, waters, and energy drinks. Each product is positioned differently in your mind. One feels energetic and youthful. One feels healthy and pure. One feels affordable and everyday. One feels premium or indulgent. But the strategy is not just to sell drinks. It is to occupy as many emotional categories as possible, so that no matter what mood you are in, there is a product that feels right for you. And very often, multiple competing drinks still trace back to the same parent company. So instead of one company fighting another, it is more like different branches of the same system, covering every possible angle of demand. Now step into fashion, and the structure becomes even more layered. Luxury brands sit at the top. Fast fashion dominates the middle. Budget clothing fills the bottom. From the outside, it feels like completely separate worlds with different customers, different aesthetics, and different values. But many of these brands are part of larger corporate groups that span all price levels. That means the same overarching business can profit whether you are buying a 20-pound t-shirt or a 2,000-pound handbag. Different brands, different markets, same structure. This creates something powerful in business terms. It allows companies to stay present no matter how consumer behavior shifts. If people trade down during a recession, one brand benefits. If people trade up during growth periods, another brand benefits. The system adapts automatically, but ownership is only one layer of the story. There is also the supply chain underneath everything. Many competing brands rely on the same factories, the same raw materials, and sometimes even the same production regions. What changes is not always the origin of the product, but the branding applied at the final stage. By the time something reaches a store shelf, it has already passed through a global system of manufacturing, logistics, and packaging. Branding is what turns that shared system into separate identities in the customer's mind. And then there is one final layer that shapes everything more than most people realize: attention. In today's world, companies don't just compete on shelves, they compete on screens, on social media feeds, on search engines, on recommendation algorithms. Visibility is no longer automatic. It is earned, bought, or engineered. That means the most successful companies are not just the ones with the best products, but often the ones with the strongest ability to stay visible in a crowded attention economy. And when large corporations own multiple brands, they also multiply their presence. More ads, more products, more visibility, more chances to enter your decision-making process before you even realize you are making a decision. So when you step back and look at the system as a whole, it does not look like a simple collection of competing companies anymore. It looks like a network, a structure, a layered ecosystem of ownership, branding, acquisition, and perception. The shelves are still full. The products are still real. The competition still exists. But it exists within a framework that is more interconnected than it first appears. And the interesting part is not that this system is hidden. It is that it is completely visible, just rarely noticed, in the context that matters. Because once you start seeing the connections, you realize something subtle but important. The world does not necessarily offer less choice than you thought. It just organizes that choice in a more structured way than the branding suggests. And that shift in understanding changes how you look at everyday decisions. Not with suspicion, not with doubt, but with awareness. And sometimes, that awareness is the difference between simply choosing a product and understanding the system behind the choice you are making.
Subscribe for more economic deep dives on industries, technologies, and global trends. New videos are coming soon, so stay tuned here.